Hi, I'm Noonan, and today I'm going to be diving into something a little different than my usual projects. Recently, I took part in the Death Jam mapping challenge, hosted by the Zlimbratski YouTube channel and Discord community. The challenge was simple: create a deathmatch map for Doom 2 using only Doom 2 assets, all within the Zandronum source port, and complete it in just 1 month. But what about my other projects? Well, after shipping the first major update to Sentry and feeling a bit of burnout with my side project Something in the Water, I realised I needed a change of pace. I decided jumping into a new toolset where I could focus on something specific like level design might be the remedy for my current brain fog and get the creative juices flowing again. So let's dive into that, shall we? Being unfamiliar with Doom's mapping tools, its deathmatch game mode, and honestly mostly unfamiliar with Doom's assets, I knew I was taking on a lot at once. Especially since I wanted to complete this project in less than 2 weeks rather than using the full month. So to make things easier on myself conceptually, I decided to revisit some past ideas that never fully materialised. That's when I turned to one of my older projects that didn't quite see the light of day: Ryse. Now you might be wondering, what does Ryse have to do with Doom? And wait, didn't Ryse already come out? Well, back in 2010 I worked on an early Xbox 360 iteration of Ryse, then known as Codename Kingdoms, while at Ruffian, now known as Rockstar Dundee. This version of the game was completely different, featuring a first-person perspective, a totally different story, and even a competitive multiplayer component, something that was mostly absent from the final release. One of the maps I poured a lot of time and energy into was a small dual level called Roman Market, or Roma for short. So I thought, why not mine some old gold and adapt it for Doom? Roma was a basic map. Essentially a large figure 8 containing a number of small tight loops taking place predominantly on a single plane. This was more than enough for Ryse, which required smaller, more confined spaces due to its slow-paced, let's say sandals on the ground melee combat. Given that Doom's core gameplay also occurs on a 2D plane, this felt like an appropriate pull. With that in mind, I began by setting some personal design goals. 1. Stick to vanilla. These days there are countless source ports and updates to Doom, all adding their own features and flair. However, despite the jam targeting Zandronum, I wanted to keep things as vanilla as possible. This meant adhering to the classic limitations: no vertical aiming, no jumping, and no crouching. While I wasn't actively supporting these modern abilities, I needed to ensure that the spaces I built wouldn't be compromised or exploited by their inclusion. Additionally, I chose to ignore some of the features such as rooms above rooms, slopes, and complex scripting in order to make something that felt authentically Doom. 2. Capture the flow, not the form. In remaking this map, my focus was on maintaining the overall design and layout, but not necessarily every fine detail or even the original themes of the space. This approach was about cutting corners to achieve strong spatial tempo and momentum from the outset, rather than focusing on capturing tone or thematic character. The goal was to ensure the map offered a strong, engaging gameplay flow, even if it meant compromising the original's aesthetics. 3. Adapt for speed. The movement and combat pace in Ryse and Doom are worlds apart. While I could have done a one-to-one trace of the Ryse map and converted it to Doom, the differences in player speed and combat range would have made it incompatible. Time for a race.
3, 2, 1, go!
Comparing a Roman Centurion to the Doom Marine is like comparing an armor-clad warrior to a Formula 1 car. Corridors needed to be extended and widened, walls needed to be curved, and doorways need not exist. Which brings me to point 4. Maintain flow. Doom's a fast game, especially in multiplayer, but it also has a surprisingly stop-and-start rhythm once combat begins. There are several ways I would lean into this and assert design intent within the space. First, start by keeping path-blocking things, like obstacles, light sources, and decorations, to a minimum. If a space demands something artistically, fish tank it. In other words, place it in a blocked recess or above the player's path. This way, when I do use path blockers, I could do so with intent, such as creating speed bumps or a set piece. It's also perfectly acceptable to wall off objects within a blocking sector, ensuring a smoother surface for the player to slide against without getting stuck. And to make players feel comfortable navigating the space, a good rule of thumb is to ensure areas flow seamlessly into each other. Bonus tip: one way I test this is by seeing if I can move around the map comfortably at full speed without needing to strafe. Try it yourself. While I don't expect this to be the case throughout an entire map, intentionally subverting this in certain areas can add interesting contrast and a bit of spice to the experience. I also decided to avoid doors. Expecting players to quickly move through a space with interactive elements can be quite annoying in practice, especially when considering latency and the intentions of other players. That said, I had plans to subvert this for special pickups or to escape hazards. 5. Metric consistency is king. One of the most important aspects of level design, especially in a fast-paced game like Doom, is maintaining metric consistency throughout a map. Typically this concerns measurements, but I like to extend the rule to incorporate visuals. This means ensuring that all details and interactive elements follow consistent rules. These help players intuitively understand the space and how to interact with it. For example, if I use a specific texture for a switch, that texture should always represent a switch and never be used as a non-interactive detail. This consistency helps players quickly recognize interactive elements without confusion or hesitation. By following consistent metrics, the map should be more intuitive and enjoyable, and in theory, more polished. So how did I go about building this? Well, with those rules in place, I sketched the basic layout using old footage and screenshots of Roma as references. I brought this layout sketch into PureRef and traced it within the Ultimate Doom Builder. I frequently jumped in and out of game to get a feel for the scale, which was crucial given the aforementioned speed difference between Roman soldiers and Doom Marines. Once I had the rough layout in place, it was time to start thinking about aesthetics. To set my visual expectations, I picked a screenshot to act as a basic visual target and fleshed it out. This helped me learn the basics of the editor, get to grips with its visual limits, and familiarise myself with the game's textures. At this point, I began thinking about the story of the space and what textures I want to use. I had this idea of blending Doom and Ryse together. Now, hear me out. Picture the scene.
Rising from the blood fountains of the Styx within Wrath, the fifth circle of hell, fallen warriors from across time and space must prove themselves in gladiatorial combat to be granted access to the fortified city of Dis. From the sanguine grotto, still boomstick in hand, ready to prove his worth in the enclave of Dis.
That could work, right? Headcanon aside, this cemented my decision to stick with the Hell texture set and go somewhat metal with the tone. After setting up the art corner, the real work began, iterating and refining the map. I started by running around the map to get a feel for the flow, making sure that the movement felt natural and the space was engaging. I placed items strategically, ensuring they felt both enticing and balanced. Next, I introduced bots for testing, which was a crucial step in understanding weapon placement and spawn distances. Running with bots provided immediate feedback on the map's gameplay dynamics. However, I did hit a snag when I added a lava pit with elevator walkways. The bots just kept getting stuck. While I couldn't fully resolve this issue, the bot testing still served its purpose by giving me a good indication of how the map would play once humans got involved. With the map in a reasonably polished state, it was time for the real test, those human players. This phase provided insights that bots simply can't. The first live test took place during Zlimbratski's stream, and overall it went pretty well.
The enclave of this, Sean Noonan. Okay, this is going to be interesting. Okay, this is looking mighty impressive. Oh, wow. Okay, this map is looking really damn cool. Oh, wow. Whoa, this is some cool stuff right here. Ooh. That looks really cool. Damn.
I jumped into the first game myself to get a direct feel for how it played. Incidentally, I got thoroughly owned. But in the second game, I switched to spectating to focus on observing player behaviour and gathering feedback on critical elements like player spawn points, weapon locations, and again, the overall map flow. One of the primary pain points I identified was around player and weapon spawns. For player spawns, there were too few and they weren't spread out enough, leading to some lower traffic areas that didn't see as much action as I'd like. As for weapon spawns, despite placing them near player starts, the fact that players were starting with just a pistol created too much friction early in the game. The solution here was straightforward: add more player starts and have players start with shotguns to reduce that initial scramble for firepower. There are also some lesser points of contention, particularly around the lava pits and the BFG and Soul Sphere locations. Despite using consistent Doom language, some players didn't realise they could use platforms as lifts and assumed lava pits were just a death sentence.
I'm doomed. Damn it.
I'm not entirely sure if this was due to unfamiliarity with needing a use input or something else, but I'm considering an additional solution. For example, using the floating skulls as teleporters, similar to what Ramiro did in Sigil. That might help. Players familiar with Sigil might recognise the mechanic, and even if they don't, there's a chance they could accidentally back into the teleporter while panicking in the fiery depths. Similarly, players seem to miss the BFG and Soul Sphere switch. This could be because they weren't expecting any form of interaction, or maybe because the skull switch blended too well into the environment. To make it more noticeable, I'm thinking of replacing it with a push button with a light, making it easier to catch at a glance, or something like that. As a side note, in both of these problematic interactive areas, I have the interaction affect multiple doors or lifts. This might be a step too far and could be seen as non-standard behaviour in Doom maps. So there's definitely a few areas for improvement, but nothing game-breaking or too fun-stifling. I'll be addressing these points in an update before making a public release. This entire process, from revisiting an old project to creating and refining a brand new map, has been incredibly rewarding. I'm confident that the Enclave of Dis is just the beginning of my work in the Doom engine. The loose narrative I've started here has a ton of potential, and I'm excited about the possibility of expanding it into a single-player WOD in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look at my process, and if you'd like to try out the map for yourself, you can find a link in the description below. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this, consider subscribing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, whether you have questions about the process or suggestions for future projects. But until next time, thanks for watching.